Today I'm going to be doing an Inktense demonstration of this zebra. I bought this reference photo from wildlifereferencephotos.com years ago, and I've just been sitting on it. I never used it. Okay, not really sitting on it because it's a digital file and that's weird. I wanted to do something super colorful, and I thought a zebra, which seems backwards because not so many colors, but I thought he would be a really good, or this would be a really good reference photo to do that with. If you are supporters over on Patreon, the 1-hour version of this tutorial is available for you now, so make sure to head over and check that out. If you are unfamiliar with Patreon, every week I upload a new 1 to 2 hour long video, complete with voiceover, and just walk you through step by step how I'm completing those projects. So if you have a hard time following along with the faster tutorials here on YouTube, that is a great option for you. If you want to check out what videos I have available without signing up, I will put a link in the video description so that you can get an idea if that's something that interests you. Now let's jump into this tutorial. So I'm working on Fabriano Artistico Extra White Hot Pressed 140-pound watercolor paper on this one, and I probably am going to switch to arches for when I buy more paper for water media. I like the Fabriano, I think, for colored pencil still, but the arches is... with the changes Fabriano made, I'm leaning towards arches, but I want to kind of use up all of my Fabriano first. So that's why I'm using this one. So with this guy, I drew him out with a water-soluble graphite pencil. And the reason that I did that is when I mix water with these paints, it's going to blend out completely and you're not going to see any of my pencil lines, which I don't like to see in either watercolor or the Inktense. I really like to not have any of those pencil lines showing. So I used the water-soluble graphite. I believe I did this one on a live stream a while back, so I will have a card pop up if you want to check that out. You can see that how I'm painting this slower. But I'm painting all of the stripes in purple, a very dark purple. I'm not jumping straight into black. And I'm doing that for two reasons. One, I want this guy to be super colorful. As you can see from my finished painting, I'm going really colorful on him. But two, if I jump straight into black, even if I was going to paint him in normal black and white colors, I wouldn't just start with black, because if I start with black, I can't go darker than that. I mean, I'm already as dark as it's going to go. So by starting in this kind of mid-tone, this purple tone, I'm going to be able to mix lighter and darker quite easily from this stage. So starting with that background, and on this background, I really wasn't sure where I was going with it. I finally decided I wanted to go do something that kind of looked like stone. So here I actually used my Inktense block and colored the paper with that. And normally I don't do that. I don't take the Inktense block or the pencil straight to the paper if I'm going to blend out, because it'll give you a grainy, gritty look. But here, I wanted a grainy, gritty look because I'm trying to create something that looks like stone. So you can see I'm taking my blocks and drawing straight on there. And I am blending it out, but watch as it dries, how it'll have that gritty look to it. And be careful when you use white. White, when you add water, won't look like it's very dark, but when it dries, it gets really opaque and really light. So be aware of that. Now, if you went too light, if it dried lighter than you thought it was going to, it's not a big deal. You can go right back over it, but just something to be aware of. Then I just flicked some of the paint on with the black just to get that more of that rough, gritty look there of the stone. Let's go ahead and we'll slow this down and start working on the zebra. I don't know how many times I'm going to call him a giraffe in this video. Something in my brain is broken and it sees a zebra and says giraffe. Can't tell you why. I do it all the time. So I apologize if I call him a giraffe throughout this video. So I'm going to start by getting just this base, this light magenta color. Now, one thing I'm going to start doing for future Inktense videos, I do want to show you my palette so you can see how I'm mixing color, but essentially I'm using the Inktense blocks as I would a watercolor pan, where I'm mixing water in with it and just creating this ink wash. Just a light magenta color, and if you want a color to be lighter, in this case, I am just mixing more water in with it. I'm using, I think this one is an oval wash, or you could also call it a Taklon bristled filbert. Now, I wanted a really rainbow color, but you've got to be careful when you add too many colors. If I started pulling much in the way of blues or greens into this, it would be very easy to create mud. Now, it can be done, and it can be done well. I've seen that done where every color of the rainbow was added. But you do have to be careful where you put what color, because if I put the yellow and then I mix blue next to it, I've got a green, and maybe I didn't want that green. You know, you just have to be aware of that and kind of plan for that based on where you put those colors. In this case, I was pretty safe opaque because I stuck with purples, magenta, red, orange, and there might have been a little bit of yellow on the zebra's shoulder. I think that's just orange though. But those colors can safely all be worked together and not create mud. I mean, I'm not mixing them completely, but some of these colors are going to overlap and it doesn't just create mud. I still keep with that very bold, very vibrant color. So I wouldn't want to, let's say, paint in all of these purples and magentas and then put green right on top of some of these. That it's not going to mix well because these colors are pretty translucent. The really dark colors tend to be more opaque. They cover really well. And then the white, of course, is opaque. But the rest of these, very translucent. Now, if you wanted a pink, you might think, okay, I want pink, but none of my blocks are quite the color I want if they're too dark. So I'm just going to mix white with the red or white with the magenta, and that's going to give me pink. The problem is if you do that, and you can do that, but if you do it that way, you can't paint over the purple stripes like I'm doing here because it would be too opaque and it would make the purple stripes foggy. But because I'm just using pure color that's thinned out with water, it's just a nice translucent wash. I'm basically glazing. And so if anything, I'm just adding more depth to the purple of the stripes. But like I said, you wouldn't want to try to mix white in with the color to lighten it up. I'm mixing water to lighten it versus the white. And I can come back through with white where I want highlights. It's just that I don't want to wash that. Here you can see I'm being messy. I'm going right over those stripes. I don't have to worry about it. But if there was white mixed in, then I have to worry about it and be careful to paint within the white lines. Some of these colors I'm getting a bit dark, but that's okay. I can go back over that and lighten them up. Now for me, I absolutely love purples and magentas with orange. So pretty much anytime I use one of those colors, I'm going to use the other. I will almost always use those two. It's like they're best friends. They go hand in hand. I just love orange and magenta together. Even if you're painting something that's super realistic, let's say you're painting an actual giraffe, not a zebra that my brain thinks is a giraffe. If you're painting a giraffe and you've got those warmer colors, those kind of golden brown colors, if you add some magenta in with it on certain areas, you'll make it still look really realistic. It's not something that you look and go, wow, that's purple, but it can give you that somewhat warm tone by adding that extra magenta. Anytime I use oranges, I'm almost always going to use magenta and the other way around. I love how they look together. So I'm going to have to create shadows here. This is what I'm starting to build up now. Right now, he's just flat. I mean, he's cute, but he's flat. I want to create a bit of depth there. And so I've got to start paying attention to where my shadows go. Now, this is what you want to watch. Don't just put shadows or highlights anywhere for the sake of, oh, I want a shadow or highlight. They need to be in the right location. If you start putting shadows in the wrong place, those shadows are there because of the underlying bone and muscular structure. If you start putting shadows in the wrong place, you will make the subject, whether it be a person or an animal, you'll make them look deformed. It doesn't look like them anymore. So you want to make sure you're looking at your reference photo and watching where those shadows go. So in this case, look under the jaw. I've really got to darken that up, and I've got to darken it in the right place. So I'm starting to shade the body. Now the body, I'm going to make this area quite a bit darker than the face. I'm not going to pull as many highlights here because it's not really where I want your focus. Even though technically this area of the body and the shoulder there is closer to the viewer, I want the viewer to focus on the face, which is farther away. So I'm going to save a lot of those highlights for once I get into the face. So I'll darken up, almost like I'm creating kind of a vignette look where I'm softening the edges, and this is going to help keep the viewer inside looking at the face, which is, like I said, where I want the focus to be. So building up shadows. Now, if I get a shadow and realize, oh, this is shaped wrong, this is not good, it's not a big deal. I can go back over it and make those adjustments. This is a very forgiving medium. I look at the white as, you can almost use it like whiteout. You can really soften out or almost just put the paper back to totally white and start from scratch if something doesn't come out quite right. Now the colors, when they're wet, they look like they're a bit more rich, and it's not, besides the case of white, which actually does dry different, it's not that the color shifts when they dry, it's that they're now matte when they dry. They're not shiny. When something is glossy, the color appears more rich. Same thing with acrylic paints, oil paints, anything like that. These paints dry very matte, which is great for getting good photographs of your work. And you guys know I don't sell my original Inktense because they're not, you know, we've got some light fast issues with some of the colors. And then once we add water, we really don't know what those light fast results are. So I don't sell my original Inktense work. but I do make prints of them. And because it dries so matte, it's really easy to get the perfect photo for prints. So the fact that it's matte is actually a good thing, but know that it's going to dry. The color's not going to look as rich as it does otherwise. So here, I kind of scribbled with that block again with some purples. I wanted to pull out some of that rich color now that I can see all the color in the zebra. And I'm taking a spray bottle and I'm just misting so that I can get this to kind of run and give me that look where it's more like a brick wall, or not a brick wall, but a concrete wall. I'm going to outline. He feels like he's being lost in that background, so I'm going to outline him completely with white. Now, that's not something you want to do if you're trying to make something look realistic, but clearly here, my pink and purple zebra is not going for realism. So it's okay. In this case, look how it makes him stand out so much more by adding that white highlight or outline. And you can see as it dries, it gets really, really light. And the spray bottle effect, the way that it made the Inktense run, gave me a really nice look. I was really excited with how that came out. So now I'm going to switch over and start using some of the Inktense pencils. I'm going to be shading. I want to get a lot of detail in the mouth here. So I'm paying attention to my reference photo. And this reference photo, by the way, if you want to paint this exact zebra, that comes from wildlifereferencephotos.com. I'll put a link in the video description. Or you can use these techniques that I'm using on any photo you get. There are plenty of free sites with zebras if you want to go that route. Anyway, the wrinkles in the face. I'm really watching my reference photo for all of those little wrinkles, all of those little details. And it's not, I mean, you might look at the photo at a distance, just kind of a quick glance, and you think, okay, the front of the face, the mouth there, just black, just draw it all black. Well, no, look at all the details. Look at the highlights, look at the shadows, look at everything in there. Look how dark this gets as I add the pencil. Now the pencil, I find if I shade things in with the pencil, and I'm not just using black here, again, this is a dark purple, I will pull some black into a few areas, but not too much. But look how dark it gets when I add the pencil and then go over it with water. Now, I don't love using my base layers with Inktense straight with the pencil because it's going to give you that more grainy, gritty look. It doesn't dissolve quite as well as a watercolor pencil. It's like the pigment wants to stick more to the paper. So I like to do a wash first or get a base layer so the white of the paper, wherever something needs to be really dark, doesn't show anymore. But now, as I go over this, you can see, there's no grainy, gritty look there at all, but I'm not fighting against the white of the paper. That would be different if I had white underneath this. But these pencils I really like for going over for the finer details here and just darkening things up. Now you can do a piece with Inktense, just the pencils or just the blocks. That's what I did when I did the cover for these tins. The blocks 100% blocks, the pencil one 100% pencil. But it is easier. I like working with them both together. If given the option anyway, I'd prefer to use both. And one of the things I like to do when I do use the blocks, I break them into pieces. I don't like when it's a whole block. They're very brittle anyway. They're probably going to break regardless, but they're easier to work with, I find, if I break them into halves or thirds of the original block. That white pencil, look how nice I can pull out these highlights. Now, the white pencil is not going to be as opaque as the white Inktense block. The Inktense block, when it dries, when you add water and paint it on like I did for the outline, it gets really white. The pencil is not going to be that white, but it's really good, as you can see with the highlights. I'm basically lightening up the color that's already there, but it's not going to be nearly as white as what I can get, or as opaque as I can get with the Inktense block. I'm giving the hint of some of the little hairs in the zebra's face, but I'm not overdoing it. If I put too many little strands of where the hair would be, he'd look like he'd have a wire hair, like a wire hair dachshund or something like that. He'd look too scruffy, and I don't want that. But I do want to give just the hint of some of the hairs. And I do this a lot when I paint or draw horses or any animal that has really smooth hair, like an Italian greyhound or a greyhound. I'll usually give you the hint of fur, but I don't sit and try to draw in every individual strand, because while you might think that extra detail is going to make it look more realistic, usually it'll make it look less realistic if it's not blended quite right, because it makes the animal look too fluffy. While a fluffy looking zebra might be cute, it's also not what I'm going for here. Now you want to be careful because when you add your Inktense pencils and you go to shade over them, that color is going to be so much darker than you were expecting. And there have been a few times on pieces where I shaded something with a pencil and then forgot that I shaded that area. Then I went to blend something else out with water and it got so dark. There was actually the secretary bird I did that on. I don't know if you remember that video. I added blue just to have a bit of a shadow on part of it. And when I went over it with water, it was like, oh crap, that is some serious blue. Like it really is bold. So just be aware of that. I was able to fix it, but it was a bit of a surprise. I was not expecting it to be that bold. So you do be aware of that. If you add something with a pencil and you do go over it with water, that color is going to change a lot. So I like to have a spare pad of paper next to me where I can test what that color is going to look like once water is added. And you don't have to add water over everything. Like in a lot of this, I'm just going to leave the pencil as it is and not blend with water. Totally up to you, depends on the look that you're going for. The brush that I'm blending smaller details, and I do the same thing when I work with my watercolor pencils. I'm using the Derwent water brushes. They come in different size or have different brush tips on them. They're so convenient. When I first started using them, I wasn't sure how much I loved them because you can use a regular paintbrush and just dip it in water. But the more that I've used those water brushes, they're just very convenient because I can leave them setting in front of me on my easel and I'm not having to constantly reach back and re-wet the brush. I am that lazy. But they are pretty handy. And I've used a few off brands. They're all pretty good. The Derwent ones are probably my favorite, but all of the ones that I've tried were decent. And I'll put a link to all of the supplies that I'm using in the video description if you're interested in checking any of this out. And I do recommend start off lighter than you think you're going to need to go. It's much, much easier to continuously make things darker than it is to try to lighten them up. When you start trying to get things lighter, you can get them, I mean, you can make them lighter as you can see I did with the highlights there, but depending on how rich you want that color to be, it can come out a little bit foggier. Like you wouldn't want to just use the white pencil everywhere for all highlights. So you might have to paint the white again to lighten things up enough that you could put the pigment, the color, let's say it's orange or magenta you wanted really bright. You could spend some extra time if you went too dark is the point. It's much, much easier. Go light and then go back through and darken up as needed. Here I'm using those pencils a lot to create the look of hair right in through his mane. One of my favorite things about this medium, I can't talk, is it is so fast to work on. I got this project done pretty quickly. So while colored pencils, I'm not very tolerant of I won't use pencils that aren't light fast because it's such a slow medium to work in. If I'm going to spend a week or 2 weeks working on a project, I need to be able to sell it. With these, with the Inktense, and I feel the same with the watercolor pencils, as long as I can get a really good photo and make prints, I'm okay with that because the medium itself is just so fast to work in comparison to colored pencil. So if you are somebody who has worked in colored pencil and you thought it's just too slow, it's not for me, the watercolor pencils or the Inktense pencils may be a good fit for you. And I've got videos I've used the Derwent watercolor pencils so far and the Caran d'Ache watercolor pencils, and I loved them both for different reasons. The Caran d'Ache watercolor pencils feel a little bit more like gouache, whereas the Derwent watercolor pencils feel like actual watercolor. I really need to do that comparison video soon. There's that water brush. Now I always with the water brush, when I want to get water out on the bristles, you're going to squeeze the little plastic handle guy on the back. I always test it first on a paper towel or dry some of it off on a paper towel that's sitting right under the shelf on my easel, because if you get a big droplet, it will run and that's not what you want. So I always kind of absorb some of it or suck some of that up into the paper towel so that I don't have that happen on my artwork. I never squeeze the water brush and just go straight onto the paper. Same thing if I'm using a regular paintbrush and I'm dipping it in water, I'm never just going to dip it into my water water well. Gosh, why are words so hard? But I'm not going to dip it into the water well and then go straight onto the palette with it. I'm going to dip the brush into the water well and then dab it onto a paper towel to sop some of that water up. Otherwise, you can just make a horrible mess. Look at the difference between the stripes that I painted with using the Inktense blocks, making the mixture with water and then painting it directly on the zebra. Look at the difference between those and the ones where I'm going over with the pencil. And you can get the blocks to be that dark, but it is so much easier using them together than using the pencils to get things really dark. Like they get so much darker, so much faster than the blocks alone. I've got some of these stripes fading out into the orange there. And then on my reference photo, there were some stripes that were kind of a lighter gray color in between the bigger, bolder stripes on him. So I used my orange and my magenta for those ones. And I just did that with a pencil right in there. So you've got the hint of it. I mean, it's not gray, but it's not, you can see that there is a stripe there, but I still stay with my whole super colorful zebra. Do you hear me pause every time I say zebra? There's always that slight pause because I'm trying to force my brain into saying zebra instead of giraffe. I find that the water brushes are just really easy to control, but only for small areas. Like I wouldn't use any of them for the large background. That would be an absolute waste of time. So using just a bigger paintbrush, and my favorite for the Inktense are the words fail me again. The Taklon bristled filberts. Those are the ones I use more often than not. And I like the filberts because you're not going to have as harsh of a start and stop point when you're making a brush stroke. Adding some highlights in here. Just using the white pencil there. And see how it lightens the color that I'm putting it over. It's not necessarily straight white. Kind of looks like it on camera because the camera is overexposing that a bit, but on the finished painting you can see it's not straight white in most of those spots. It's just lightening up the color that I'm putting it over. If I want straight white, I'm going to switch to the Inktense block and paint that on. So even if you get the Inktense pencils, I would still get at least one or two of the Inktense blocks in the white. It's just such a useful color to have. And all of these colors are available open stock, so if you run out of one or you really like one, you can easily buy them that way. I get them from either Jerry's Artorama or dickblick.com when I buy them open stock. Really working on the contrast at this point. Just hyping that up a bit. Few last little details in there. Again, darkening up some of these areas, especially around the body. I need to darken that up quite a bit more. Right in through here. And then we have the final piece. And like I said, you can really see here, it just photographs so beautifully. One of the reasons that the reason that it's photographing so beautifully is that it is so matte. So watercolor, gouache, Inktense, anything like that that doesn't have a glare or that high gloss. The high gloss things like acrylic paints, oil paints, they can be a bit difficult to photograph just because of the glare. Obviously it can be done. I do it all the time, but it takes a little bit more work. With Inktense, I feel like I can just go snap a photo really quick and everything's going to be perfect that first time through. Same thing, like I said, watercolor and gouache, anything that's a very flat finish is going to be much easier to photograph. So if I were to do something for me, like let's say I was going to illustrate a children's book, this or watercolor pencils or again gouache, really good mediums because they're all very fast to work in and they photograph so easily, so well. So it would be easy to get a whole lot of paintings done very, very quickly if that was something that you were doing. But there is my finished piece. Again, the reference photo, if you wanted to use that, is going to be, I will have the link below in the video description. I impaled myself in the face, or tried to anyway, with a straw. Now this side of my face is all swollen. Can you tell? It makes me talk funny. Straws make better weapons than you might assume. Proof. I was a little tempted to stab myself on the other side too, so I could just have nice full lips on both sides. That's a terrible idea. Don't do that. Have you subscribed yet? If not, I have a handy button right there. It's round, it's orange round. I forgot. Have you subscribed yet? If not, I have a handy button right there. It's round with an orange arrow going towards it. If you click on that, that'll help you to keep up to date with my videos every week. Actually, I'm lying. It won't, because YouTube doesn't notify people anymore. So you may also want to click on that bell icon, or the best way to make sure that you're kept up to date with my new videos is sign up for my free email newsletter, where every week I send out one email updating you with whatever videos went live and some art motivation and other stuff like that.